Let's get into this Bonnie Raitt thing. So this is a project that you both mixed and mastered. I think we're going to play a song now, the first song on the album, and then we can talk about it a little bit. So
okay, we'll listen to the play. Cool.
It starts out slow. Go ahead and go. Pretty soon the melody is like a rainstorm tin roof symphony. But it starts out slow. It goes on and on for way too long. It always ends on a bad note. If you could dance at all, you'd dance alone. It goes on and on. The quiet behind a slamming door, the break of a heart that won't break no more. Get away wheels in a straight line, serenade of a made-up mind. There ain't no rhyme, just wasted time. Moonlight spotlight shining down on a made-up mind and a love gone wrong. There ain't no rhyme. The quiet behind the slamming door, break of a heart that won't break no more. Get away wheels in a straight line, serenade of a made-up mind. The quiet behind a slamming door, break of a heart that won't break no more. Get away wheels in a straight line, serenade of a made-up mind. Of a made-up moonlight spotlight shining down on a made-up mind. Moonlight spotlight shining down on a made-up mind and a love gone wrong. Moonlight spotlight shining down on a made-up mind and a love gone wrong.
Wow, that was pretty special. So yeah, tell us a little bit about the mix and working with Bonnie, because I know she attended a lot of the sessions, and like how you made your decisions around placement of where things are in the room, and yeah, just tell us everything.
Well, she was, besides just being a huge fan, I had to stop myself. I wanted to take a, like every time I was like, no, take a picture. No, like, I was trying not to be fanboy and like hold it down, because I just think she's awesome, and her voice and just her presence. She's is one of the most grounding people. Like she's just, so she was awesome. She had a great idea what she wanted to do. We started having a conversation to imagine this from the start, and thinking about the instrumentation: drums, bass, guitar, vocal, and the keyboard. And then on different songs there might be a second guitar or so. So, you know, sitting with her, we started thinking that the idea that just because we have all of this space and all of the different things to use doesn't suit her music, doesn't suit her style, it isn't who she is, it isn't flashy, it's not related to things that are like whiz bang and moving around. So the whole concept then was to really think about the presentation of seeing her in front of you with space around you, and use the ATMOS speakers to be a container for that, like embiggen the process a bit, like the presentation of it. And like I said, she was great to work with. She knew what she liked right away. She was like, I don't like that, I like this, let's do that. And you know, it was, I think anytime that you can work with the artist, it's always going to work out better. You know, because we're here as engineers to make their music. We're here to make them better, them present whatever the art that they're trying to get across. And so she was a pleasure to work with.
Did you have like
Ricky
a
was
rough?
there too.
Did you have a rough mix up the very first time she showed up?
I did.
And then that was like her first time hearing Atmos.
So yeah, you know what? And here, that's a good point. You know, one of the things with a lot of this in this time frame right now is a lot of people's first experience hearing it. And if it's not your first experience hearing Atmos, it might be your first experience hearing it on speakers in a tuned environment. So as a mastering room, I'm dialed in. And for her to sit down and not be on headphones and listening to something that she's been hearing, you know, from a mobile device or a sound bar, maybe from a movie or something, to actually sit, she just, there was this amazing, like this relaxed spot where she was sitting up and she wanted to hear it. And so we went through and we actually, I played, and I love doing this, playing DJ, like a bunch of songs, like here's something that's really wacky, here's something that's really cool, here's a classical tune, here's a jazz tune, like here, get a footprint of where her perception, like what caught her attention, even just watching somebody react to different things, answering questions, and then we had a dialogue about her music. So from there, it was like, okay, what do you want to do? Okay, cool, this is how I envision. Okay, cool. And so then she went away, and I worked on it, and then she came back, and you know, we a couple little tweaks, and then we just listened to the record twice through because she wanted to, and we sat there and had a great time, and that was about it.
And you said that was all objects for that song, at least. What kind of went into that decision-making process?
Well, so the LFE to me is so there's the bed, the objects. I want to be careful about using, in a mix environment, using too much LFE, because a lot of times people rely on it, and then if you don't have it in the playback system, something's missing. Or if it's bumped up and it's, then it's going to be way too much. So we kind of made the decision to just forego the bed completely and use all the instruments as objects, because then when on an Atmos system, when it renders back, it's right exactly where we placed it. It's the beauty of the metadata of the objects, of the localization. So we could put everything where we wanted to. And I was looking at watching this as it was going through and remembering that even the reverbs and delays and things that I use in the sense of space going around it were also objects.
Wow.
Yeah. So the verbs, I didn't use the bed for verbs and things like that.
Cool.
I made them particular sounds, and they were different EQ points. So I did a stereo reverb that was here, and another reverb that was back there. I think I did some time delay. I did some other stuff that went up top, but each of them were EQ'd and time delayed and decay time also to fit this front-back presentation.
Nice. Yeah. That was a great mix. Let's go back to some of the pure mastering work that you do, and just curious to hear about how you work with the mix engineer. How does that process go? Are they coming to you? Or is it remote sometimes? Like, what's the collaboration like for, like, say, the Alicia project or the Lyle Lovett project?
Well, since Chuck is floating around here somewhere, the Lyle Lovett project we did, the Chuck Ainley mix, I saw him here a second ago. Give him a shout out because he's doing this tomorrow.
Yeah.
Okay, you have to come here to stuff, because what Chuck did with the Lyle Lovett record is fantastic. But Chuck called up and he said, okay, cool, I want to talk to you about this record, let's talk about doing it. This is my first foray into this, so can I send you some mixes and can you tell me what I'm doing? And I think that dialogue back and forth, whether it's giving cues, like when I was pointing at the speaker and saying, this is a little bit here, a little bit, whatever, if you fix this, it was more about how's the overall presentation. So with Chuck, he was just getting a handle on the low end, he was getting a handle on the imaging, and Chuck's an amazing, fantastic engineer. I bow to him as his engineering skills, and kind of helping him feel comfortable in making the decisions that he wanted to make. And here, like, you want to empower the mix engineer to feel really good about them representing the will of the artist. So as the mastering side of things, looking at the polishing aspect of it, the less I do, but the more that I can help him and understand. Chuck went back, and we were just talking about this a few minutes ago, he went back and then after me giving him some feedback, adjusted the EQ in his room. Oh, wow. but it's not, again, back to the stereo thing, it's not unlike, you know, somebody's got NS10s in a small room, and I end up getting a stereo mix, they're proof, you know, or something, and then you can go back to the engineer and say, you know, this is what I'm hearing, and they treat their room, and the next record they come back with is more balanced. Yeah, same kind of thing. So he went through that process, and yeah, that's fantastic. He does like the drum sounds on that record. I told him I think he's one of the best drum sound getters. He's like, oh, it's all the player. I'm like, no, you captured it. It sounds awesome.
Yeah, it does. Well, I'm excited to hear it again tomorrow. Talk about loudness a little bit and how Atmos is different in terms of loudness versus stereo, and like the ability to have more dynamic range in an Atmos mix. And
yeah, you know, one of the things I really gravitate toward, I think, is one of the many facets I love about Atmos is the ability to have dynamic range and space. You can use space, and you can use, things don't have to be smashed to be in your head. As a matter of fact, when, you know, having the stereo reference tool, a lot of times when I'm working with somebody, we're so used to hearing the center image in the middle of your head. You have to have a lot of good dialogue to say that what we're doing and have people be okay with it is that it's pulling it out. It's pulling us into a sense of space, not, you know, bullhorns on our ears. So the tools, the processing, the compression that a lot of folks do to get out of two speakers is not necessary in this world. So having the conversation with the mix engineer, you know, I would say when somebody is mixing Atmos from the stereo files, the files used to create the stereo mix, I think in its best case we have to go back before what gets made for the stereo mix, because a lot of times people are taking overcompressed, judgmental, soapboxy, and I love it anyway, I agree with it, and I'll say it again, but overcompressed files that are meant to work out of two speakers, where all this music has to be squozed together. But we don't have to do that to get it around to different places. So go back before the stems. When somebody just gives me, you know, stereo stems, I usually go back and say, can you know, separate those? They don't need all that processing. It actually opens it up. Doing less makes it open up that much more. So having that dialogue with the engineer to be able to have them back off a little bit, or realize that they're not trying to recreate the stereo mix, especially listening on headphones. Right. Because everybody's so used to that, and even when the artist hears it, they're like, well, it doesn't sound like it doesn't sound as loud. It's not as whatever. Well, it might be as loud. It's just not as in the same spot. So the having a dynamic range, having a different presentation where the space is, has been requiring a lot of dialogue, but I think more and more people are starting to get that this is different and allow it to be different. We're not trying to recreate the stereo mix here. It doesn't collapse down to the stereo mix. I think that they're two different things, or two different mentalities and two different processes, just like making a vinyl master is different than making a CD master. Best case scenario is they're two completely different masters, not the same thing. Totally. Same thing here with the mixes and Atmos.
So what other advice do you give to a mix engineer who's going to deliver you an Atmos mix for the first time, besides the stems piece?
Oh yeah, it's a good one. Well, besides don't compress it, you know, like whatever. Do what you need to do to make it sound. I would never tell anybody not to do anything if it was for creative purposes. But if it's for loudness purposes, it doesn't need to happen. And if it's for recreating the feel of the stereo with the two speakers, again, to me, it doesn't need to happen, because it's different. Allow it to be different, you know. So I would say listen to a lot of things. As a mix engineer who's getting into it, I would say sit with other people. I think one of the best things we can do is actually listen with other people. We're in such a world right now where music is so personalized, personal experience. We all grew up with listening to going over to somebody's house and taking records and share, and you talk about it, and listen to that snare, and how about these vocals and stuff like that. I would say somebody that's wanting to get into it really should spend time sitting with other people, listening to stuff, and talking about what they like and what they don't like, because that's going to start to inform your decision-making process. And then your dialogue as a mix engineer with your client, the artist.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What about the fantastic Negrito record that you recently did in Atmos, and other local Bay Area artists? Talk a little bit about how that came about and what the process was like.
As a matter of fact, that was kind of the same thing. I'm just a fan of his music, and so I called him and I said, I want to do your record. So I mixed the last one. and I'm bad with names. I can't remember whatever the last one was, not the one that just came out. But he's like, I don't know what this is. I said, come on over, let me play you some stuff. And so he and his manager came over, and we spent a good 4 or 5 hours just talking concepts. And again, same kind of thing. I played a bunch of stuff. Here's this. His music has so many different interesting little pieces and parts. He's so creative. He's an unbelievably creative guy. I think he's a true star and a talent, and he's just going to keep going crazy from here. But he was like, okay, cool. Kind of see what this is all about. Okay, cool. And then we had the dialogue. Do you want it to be similar to the stereo? Do you want me to fly things around? What do you like? You know, what is your concept of your album? And I loved it. He looked over and he goes, I already have the stereo album. You do you. So he went away, and I mixed the record. And then he came back and sat down. And he was like, okay, cool. Maybe put that vocal over here on this side because I was envisioning it this way or something. But other than a few of those kinds of choices, I went nuts. Cool. I had like 120 tracks, and these were stems. This was a crazy record. But it was so I mixed that one as well as mastering it. But it was super fun to do because, like I said, he's got so many different pieces and parts. Lent itself to such an engaging, active listener experience.
And then did you let him hear the headphone first, or did you have him come back to your studio and hear it on speakers first?
Oh, definitely speakers first.
Definitely speakers.
Always, if I can, always, like, to me, this is where it exists. And this is where you can hear it. And for a lot of folks, it's the only place you can hear it. A lot of times it's the only time you can hear it, or, you know, there's some other limitations, cost or speakers, or, you know, late at night or whatever it happens to be. But, you know, we don't mix for earbuds and then hope it sounds good on speakers. I'm still an old school guy where I think that you mix for the best you can and know that it's going to work its way down to the other formats. And so I think that was a huge part of that. So anytime I can bring somebody to the studio to sit and listen, and then go, here, now take this with you. Now you go check it out on your headphones.
All right.
He went and bought the speaker. He went and bought the Apple Maxes or whatever it is, those things. And,
right on.
And listened to it, and, you know, talk through the process about here's how you listen to it, and he was like, okay, cool. And called and gave a thumbs up and said, let's do it.
Cool. So we got time for one more question. I'll ask you anything else that I haven't asked you yet that you wanted to talk about, or you want me to hit you with another question?
Oh shit. No, I think you asked ones that we talked about that I wanted.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So I'll throw a wild card at you. What's the most interesting and/or surprising thing that you've learned working on all these ATMOS projects?
Interesting or surprising? Well, the first thing that comes to mind, and I don't know if this is probably but the first thing that comes to mind with this that I think about is, it's amazing how much stuff can be hidden in a stereo mix. And I don't want to say lazy mixes or bad edits or over compression to squeeze things in because it's like the spackle, you know. Take a piece of carpet, you know, you're going to make a table and you cut it short just so you can put in some wood filler and make it work. Like, no, measure it right and cut it right. And what I'm finding is that when you move things around and when things are isolated on their own, you better be paying attention to all the details. And I'm finding out who's paying attention to details and kind of, you know, who's trying to just slide one under the door, you know? Because it really opens up that world when you have that.
But also for the listener can then experience all that stuff, mistakes and all, because it's so much more present in the room.
Well, and the other thing too is that spot right there is not always the best spot to listen. That precious center spot is great to hear the environment, but one of the things I love to do because of speakers is walk around when I'm listening to something. So I always QC walk against circles or on my console.
Yeah.
Always, because I want to hear what all the speakers are doing, and if I catch something coming out of a spot, you know, it's going to grab my attention if I'm standing back there and I hear it.
That's why you're in such good shape, because you're getting all that exercise.
I don't know, this is the COVID-15 or whatever. I do walk a lot, but the idea of what's going to sneak out of some of the different speakers if you're not paying attention, you know, you'll hear a blunt edit sometimes, or you'll hear a delay go, you know, or a reverb stop or something, you know, and it's good to be active when listening. Because I'd say physically active when listening, because I want to be active when listening metaphysically.
Yeah. Well, Michael, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and thanks to all of you for coming by. Nice to see you, and we have a happy hour going on. Grab a drink.
Uh-oh, awesome. I got here at the right time. Thanks, Jordan. I appreciate it. Thanks for all the work you do. Love the project, the product.
you.
Yeah.